You are listening to the University of Miami School of Law podcast, a pre-law resource brought to you by the admissions experts at Miami Law. Visit us on the web at www.law.miami.edu. I'm Joe Matthews. Today I'm joined by Therese Lambert, Director of the Office of Student Recruitment and a seasoned law school admissions professional. How are you, Therese?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
So today we're going to speak about the application process to law schools, and we would love to get your advice on these questions. Now, when should a student start applying is the first question, as most law schools have application deadlines. Therese, what are your takes on the differences between strict application deadlines and rolling base deadlines?
Well, every school is different, so students should really look at the websites to see what the policy is of each school. Those on rolling admissions is advisable to apply as early as possible. It's much better to be under the gaze of admissions counselors early in the season when they're not overwhelmed by applications and they have a fresh eye. So if you can, complete your file as early in the application cycle as possible. And I would say the same is true even with hard deadlines, that being toward the front of the line is better than being toward the back of the line.
And how does Miami Law operate?
We are on rolling admissions. I strongly suggest people try to complete their application by early December or the end of the year, if at all possible. Obviously, there is the February LSAT. We do accept the February LSAT and even through June. Through the June LSAT, but again, applying early, being at the front of the line, not only for admissions, but scholarship consideration is really strongly encouraged.
And can an applicant apply before their LSAT score has been released?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's advisable as well, because then when the LSAT score is released, there are no more delays and everything is in the file ready to be reviewed.
And what exactly are admissions committees looking for in an applicant?
They want the strongest applicant possible. They're obviously going to look immediately at the academic record and the LSAT score. Those are the two things that everyone has to present to their file. So within the academic record, they're going to look at the track record, whether you started off slow, improved dramatically, what major you have, the rigor of your courses, etc. The other thing committee members will look at are the miscellaneous factors people bring, leadership abilities, community service, work experience, anything that sort of indicates the individual is well-rounded and going to be a good student.
Now, I know a lot of law schools will accept resumes in the application. Should that resume include anything from high school or things prior to undergraduate?
Not really. I mean, they're going to be looking mostly at your college record. For individuals who have been out of school for a while, obviously they're going to look at your work record or what you've been doing in the interim. High school events or activities, only if they're really relevant to the college application or there's a timeline in terms of particular project or athletic ability, something like that.
Now, you mentioned that academic considerations is very, very important in the application process.
Correct.
What particular undergraduate majors are preferred by admissions counselors?
Well, this is misunderstood, I think, by undergraduate students. Think about what lawyers do. They do everything.
Right.
They're engaged in almost every aspect of our life, from the traditional law firm practice to policy issues, corporate work, international trade and finance, cyber law, everything. And so the talents that you need to bring to the table are going to be different. A tax lawyer is going to need something different than someone who may be doing environmental, have environmental interests. So I encourage students not to get bogged down in thinking they have to have one major over another. Obviously, the typical majors are political science, history, business, philosophy, journalism, but we also have hard science majors, chemistry majors, music majors, pre-med majors, etc. So I really encourage people to choose the major that they think they're going to thrive at and that they're most interested in, and then the law schools will appreciate that when they review their file.
And are the rigors of those scientific ones that you mentioned taken into account? Like, for example, what if a student was a pre-law major for their first 2 years, they didn't perform well, but then they decided to change majors into something they were more keen to, and they did well?
Absolutely. We look at the major itself, and usually it's the reverse. People go in to pre-med, and then they decide that's not what they want to do and decide to go into political science or something else because they set their sights on law school. But for instance, if you have an engineering major, typically engineering majors do not have as high academic record, GPAs, because there tends not to be any inflation in that major. Same thing in the sciences. So we definitely look at the rigor of the major and everything that means within that major. It's not a cut and dry situation, in other words, where we, treat every GPA the same and look at it with the same eye.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Correct.
If you don't do well in your freshman year, there's still possibilities to demonstrate academic success.
Well, yes, and we'll look at the track record for sure. And I do encourage students to explain. If there's an explanation as to, why their record changed significantly, hopefully it was significant change, we will definitely take that into consideration. It's much better to explain it than leave us guessing as to what happened in a particular semester or a particular year. And that is true for personal reasons. Sometimes there are reasons that a student's academic record falters a little bit. It could be a personal situation, a health situation, a family issue, and if that is the case, they should feel free to explain that to us so that we're human beings. I think that people forget that committee members who read their files are human beings too and know that life sometimes intervenes.
Now, as you know, Therese, we invite questions from prospective law students, and this one comes from Esther, and I bring it up now because it's related to what we were talking about. She says, I graduated as a biomedical major in undergrad and have never taken any law school classes. Should I have taken some law school related classes? And if not, can I take law related classes now at my local university to prep for law school?
Well, I think individuals have to look at the skills that really are necessary to do well in law school. Analytical reasoning, critical thinking, obviously writing is important, writing and research. So regardless of the major, if an individual feels that they're lacking in some of those skills, absolutely you can take an additional course even at a community college over the summer. Or added on to their curriculum. The other thing I think that many students should take are business, have some type of business course or econ course behind them, other than just the requirement. Because the reality is that the practice of law involves business, and employers often like to see that on their record as well.
So how should they approach letters of recommendations? And who should they ask?
I think because you are applying to a rigorous academic environment, I think it makes sense, if possible, to get at least one and perhaps 2 letters of recommendation from professors who know you well. I always tell students to not presume that professors are ready and enthusiastic about jumping on letters of recommendation, particularly since they probably get asked by several students. So approach them early and also say to them, do you feel you know me well enough, and are you comfortable with writing me a strong letter of recommendation? It's really important that you know that they're going to take the time to promote your cause. So I suggest that you ask them that question. Obviously, if they hesitate or seem a little bit cautious about it, then that might give you an indication that maybe they're not that enthusiastic and you can go elsewhere. If they are willing, then ask them if they're willing to sit down with you for 15 minutes just to go over your resume so that they know what else you've been doing with your life as an undergraduate student. And that helps them flesh out the letter of recommendation so it comes across as more genuine and it's more all-encompassing. If you have been out of school for a long time and don't have connections anymore with your professors, then use employers or others who know you well and will take the time to write you a strong letter.
I know myself, having asked for many letters of recommendation, it's the bane of my existence. How do you suggest students go around requesting these, and when should they start? 'Cause I know sometimes it takes quite a long time.
If someone is in school, I actually suggest that they think about who they want to ask, but which professors they want to ask in their junior year, in the spring of their junior year, and tell them, Professor, I'm thinking of applying to law school, or I plan to apply to law school next fall, and you know, I would like to see if you're willing to write me that letter. And then early in the fall semester, approach them. So that gives them plenty of time to think about what they want to write and to actually get it done. The last thing you want is to have the letters of recommendation holding up the review of your file.
And what about for a student who's been out of undergrad for a while? Do you think it's smart for them to go back and ask for a professor that they once knew, or go with a professional?
I think if they've stayed in touch with the professor or they feel quite sure that the faculty member is going to remember them, then sure, why not go back to that faculty member? The other thing also is some students are taking gap years in between undergraduate and law school, and if they know they're going to do that, then stay in touch with those professors that you want to ask to write your letters down the road. Write them an email from time to time. Keep them appraised of what you're doing and what activities you've been involved with. And for employers, I mean, it's a tricky thing because sometimes students who are in a job don't want their employer to know that they are looking to going to law school. So, you know, we understand that. Obviously, try to get individuals that are not going to put you in jeopardy of your present position, but, you know, individuals who can speak toward your professionalism, your sense of responsibility, your time management skills, all of those things that you learn in the workforce are still important in law school for success.
And now we suggest that you really do go and get the specific answers for these questions for the specific law schools you're interested in. But for an example, Therese, what does Miami law require in a letter of recommendation? How many? What's the maximum? Things like that.
Miami requires 2 letters of recommendation. We will take up to 4. I suggest that if you supply 4, that the individual you ask have known you from different perspectives, whether that's faculty members, which again, I suggest at least one be from a faculty member if possible, an employer, someone who has seen you in a leadership position, in an internship, etc. The more perspectives we have on you, the better. And you want your recommenders also to confirm what you talk about in your personal statement, that you're going to be the student that would love to have in our class.
Now, these letters of recommendation are submitted through CAS or CAS. Can you explain exactly what that acronym is and what it means for a law student?
Sure. All of the ABA-approved law schools are members of the Law School Admissions Council, and basically everything's done electronically through the Credential Assembly Service. So you would have your recommenders submit letters to this service, and then they send out your applications as well as all of the supporting documents that you submit to the schools that you indicate you're applying to.
Now, for most law schools, the personal statement is equally as a vital part of the application as the letter of recommendation. Can you talk a little bit about how important the personal statement is and what that might be?
I really think that the personal statement is one of the, outside of the academic record in GPA, let me start that over. I really think the personal statement is very important. Obviously, the LSAT and GPA are the other components, but the personal statement allows you to talk about yourself, what you're going to bring to the table, your unique qualities and characteristics. A lot of people have trouble with the personal statement. Oftentimes I'm told I'm having a hard time deciding what to write or even starting to write it. And what I tell individuals is just start writing a stream of consciousness sort of dialogue of what you think are the highlights of your background and your characteristics. And think of it this way: if you had 10 minutes in a room with the committee making this decision, what would you absolutely want them to know about you? What would be the highlights you'd bring out to them during that 10 minutes? And that's what you want to do in your personal statement. You want to concentrate on your strengths. Don't use it as a venue to explain your weaknesses. You can do that elsewhere in your application. Talk about what what your interests are. If there's a specific interest in that particular school, you can of course indicate that, what your goals are. But besides what you say about yourself, you also want to give the reader the feeling that you're going to be proactive in the learning process, intellectually engaged, that you're going to be a strong member of the student body, that you're going to be prepared, responsible, focused, and fun to teach. This is what people are looking for when they're reading your personal statement. And as I said previously, you want your recommenders to confirm what you're saying about yourself. In other words, your student would be remiss in not admitting.
Is there a certain length that you suggest? Is there something that might be too long or too short?
Well, remember that you are submitting, in most cases, the resume, and so what you want to do is you can highlight things on your resume, but you certainly don't want it to be just a rehash of everything on your resume. I suggest 2 typewritten pages, double-spaced, but clearly if you feel you need more room, then use it. I don't think there's any set length for the personal statement, at least not at Miami, but again, you want it to be concise, well-written, and memorable. Now, some law schools don't have an open-ended personal statement. They actually have questions that they'll ask you, or they'll give you a set of questions and ask you to answer 2 of them or something like that. So obviously pay attention to every school's policies in terms of what they want you to submit.
Now, Miami law, correct me if I'm wrong, does not offer interviews for the application process. So do you recommend that the personal statement act as your interview speaking to the admissions committee?
Absolutely. I mean, again, this basically is your way of them getting to know you, and you know what type of student you're going to be. We don't consider you in a vacuum. We are looking at you first individually. We're reviewing your strengths and weaknesses, but of course you are being compared with the applicant pool. So you want to make your whole package, not just your personal statement, but your whole package as compelling as possible. And so do everything you can to make it forceful. And again, make it so that we want you as a member of our student body.
You've read quite a few personal statements, I'm sure, in your career. Has there been one thing that stood out to you as like a big, do not do this anymore, please?
Well, one thing is sometimes students will talk about the law as if they've already been in law school, like talk about constitutional law or civil rights. And you know, you're talking to professors in some cases, and people who do not need to be told what constitutional law is. And it also is not serving your purpose, which is telling us about yourself. You're talking about the law, not, you know, about why we should want you at our particular school. So that is the one thing I think you should avoid. And also try to be genuine. I think sometimes when students try to use words that clearly they looked up in the dictionary and plugged in, it doesn't work well. Try to have it a genuine, sincere, and natural sounding personal statement. At the same time, sophisticated, obviously, and well worked. And you certainly don't want grammatical errors, typos, punctuation problems, etc. You want to make sure it's very, very well written and presented.
I'm sure the shift from paper application to electronic has created an easier application for applicants, but at the same time caused some issues in errors, such as putting in the same law school in every single personal statement that you submit. So those things you also want to take a look at and make sure you're being very accurate in the details within your personal statement, even as simple as, I want to go to your school and be in the right school.
Oh, absolutely. We've had individuals say, that they've wanted to be a Hoya their whole life, and they're applying to Miami Law. That doesn't play well.
If a student has something like a negative incident in their past or maybe a documented disability, should they put that in the personal statement or elsewhere in the application?
That's truly up to them. I mean, I think that they can make the choice if they want to divulge a disability at the point of application, or if it should be in a separate statement or after they've been admitted, particularly if they want academic or are going to be seeking academic assistance. While they're a law student, I think it makes sense to alert the institution so that they can address and help them in their success at that law school.
Do they need to disclose that information in the application?
I don't believe any school can require it. And again, I think it depends on the individual as to how comfortable they feel about it. But I do think at some point they should disclose it so that they can get any assistance that they are going to be requesting or requiring. We certainly want every student to succeed, so it doesn't make sense not to let us know if we have resources to help a student hit the ground running when they get here.
And what about the negative instances like disciplinary actions or academic or criminal issues?
It's absolutely critical that individuals look very carefully at the language used in every school's application and to definitely reply honestly and fully to all of those types of questions. The truth is that the bar has access to applications. If they see any problem in the way questions were answered, it can be a tremendous problem in getting sworn into the bar, even if the individual passes the bar. So look at everything carefully. My advice is to include information rather than exclude it, even if you're not, if the question doesn't suggest that you need to divulge it. Why? Because you want to be uniform in the way questions are answered. Again, you don't want to have there be any indication that you are trying to hide anything. And bars and law schools themselves are much more lenient with people who are forthright and are past that situation and have come out on the other side a better person. And we fully understand, again, that people are human. They make mistakes. They may have made mistakes when they were younger that clearly they wouldn't make now. And so it's important to, again, to fully disclose information as requested.
Now, I know sometimes there's confusion about what the benchmark of disclosure is. So is there a difference between something as simple as a traffic citation, or should they disclose things like they got cited for a sound disturbance in their dorms? What level of disciplinary action should be disclosed on an application?
Well, at Miami, we're very specific, where we basically say that things that have been expunged have to be disclosed, that any disciplinary action has to be disclosed, that traffic tickets over $200 have to be disclosed. So again, we're very specific, and I think you have to look very, very carefully at the language of every application. And frankly, should you have any if you're unsure, basically call the school. And when you talk to the individual, basically get their name as to who you talk to and their title. And I even suggest that you write them an email after the discussion and say, this is my understanding about disclosure based on our discussion. And you always have then a record of that should there be any question of the fact that you were really trying to do everything and making sure that you did everything that was required by that institution.
Well, thank you so much. Teresa, how can we reach you if we have any further questions?
Well, we're always available. Our email address is admissions@law.miami.edu, and the phone number is 305-284-6746. We also invite people to come in for a tour, to sit in on classes, to have an advisement session with one of the staff members. We welcome visitors.
All right, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
The University of Miami School of Law Office of Admissions and Student Recruitment offers open house events, tours of the law school, class visits, and advice about applying to Miami Law. The office also maintains a pre-law headquarters website and a prospective student website, which includes a wonderful resource, 29 critical questions. To speak or have an advising session with a member of the University of Miami Law Student Recruitment Team, please contact the Director, Teresa Lambert, Associate Director, Joe Matthews, or Assistant Director, Humberto Duarte, at the Office of Student Recruitment in room F203 of the Law School, or at 305-284-6746.